Hey everybody, it's Matt Mayoko from NBC Sports Bay Area with an update on the Thursday of Chicago Bears week 14. We're going to start off with the injury report, and then I'm going to go into maybe the best argument or a strong argument of why the 49ers, this isn't a teardown, and why no matter what happens the rest of the season, I think the 49ers are going to run it back with some minor alterations to the roster and perhaps the coaching staff. But first, let's get to the injury report for Thursday. Did not practice Aaron Banks and Nick Bosa, also Jordan Mason and Trent Williams. So I would not imagine that any of those players will be in this game. Banks, look for him to be replaced by Ben Barch again. Williams will be replaced by Jalen Moore. And then Nick Bosa, of course, has been out for several weeks, a couple weeks. And so they'll patch it together with that defensive line rotation. And then Isaac Guerendo takes over for Jordan Mason, who took over for Christian McCaffrey. So the 49ers are I guess they're at their number 4 running back when you consider they also lost Elijah Mitchell before the season even started. Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles was moved from did not practice to limited practice, special teamer, Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. And then a couple other changes. George Odom did not practice due to a knee injury. He's a special teams player, of course. Yetur Gross-Matos went from full participation to limited. And then a little bit of good news finally. Dealmador Lenore goes to full participation for Thursday's practice. This video is brought to you by Canyon Club Brewery, located in Moraga, California. Canyon Club has a wide selection of beers, a wide selection of menu items for those of you wanting to have dinner or lunch or wherever at Canyon Club. And it's a very family-friendly atmosphere with a lot of outdoor space, even though, I mean, it's so funny. Just got back from Buffalo where it's, 28 degrees and snowing, and then you come back to the Bay Area and it's almost like too warm outside right now, despite my look right now, which I talked about a couple times ago. I had some stuff going on with my ear, thus the wearing the stocking cap just to cover some stuff up. Okay, so when you look at the 49ers this season, part of me thinks, well, because of the injuries and everything else, of course, they're not a playoff team. And when you look at where they are currently, clearly they are a worse team now than they were earlier in the season. 49ers are 5-7. And let's face it, they absolutely blew games early in the year, losing to the Rams and to the Arizona Cardinals. So right there, you would just swap that 5-7 record and it becomes 7-5. I know that's not how it works, but just saying that even with where they are now, they very easily could, and they definitely should have a winning record. And that doesn't even take into account the game against Seattle recently, where they lost that one. But just think about the games they've lost. It was a dropped pass that probably would have enabled them to run out the clock against the Rams and win that game. It was a fumble. That was obviously by Ronnie Bell, fumble by Jordan Mason against the Cardinals, opened the door for Arizona to win that game. And you look at where their roster is right now with their defense. Last year in the postseason, the starting defense that they had in this last game against Buffalo, they only had 2 starters defensively who started in the postseason and who were back starting in this game against Buffalo. One of them was Fred Warner, who's playing on a broken ankle. The other is Charvarius Ward, who was having kind of a down year, and then he goes on a bereavement leave, and he hasn't played in a full month. So you can see why the defense isn't as good as it was, and let's just take, coaching and everything else out of the equation. The thing that's really interesting to me is that when you look at the offensive and defensive rankings, that's yards per game, it's not too different than what it was last season, even with all the changes on offense and defense. For instance, last year for on defense, now this is kind of shocking to me. 49ers, they've given up six more yards per game this season than last season, but they've actually improved in total defense, the rankings for total defense. That's yards allowed. Offense, they're still a top 10 offense in the league, again, yards allowed. But where it is different, a lot different, is in points scored, points allowed. And a lot of that has to do with special teams and the yardage they give up on special teams that either puts the opposition in a better position to score or it sets their own offense back. So, in points allowed, last year the 49ers were third in the NFL, and in points scored, they were third in the NFL. This year, they're 24th in points allowed and 16th in points scored. Basically, they've had a touchdown drop off, 6 or 7 point drop off defensively and offensively from last year to this year. Now, where does that stack up? Like, why is it that way? It's because of the red zone. The 49ers were last year the best red zone offense in the league. This year, they're 27th. And on defense, it's even more dramatic. They went from 11th last year. I don't know if it's more dramatic, but it's equal. Let's just say that. Went from 11th last year, red zone defense, to 31st this year, giving up a touchdown on 70.7% of the opposition's red zone appearances. So I am of the personal opinion that if you're up there in yards gained, if you're up there defensively in yards allowed, that it's an easier fix to get better in the red zone. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I just think if you have the pieces there where you're holding the opposition to not a whole lot of yards, if you have the kind of offense that can gain a lot of yards, it's to me there's just something amiss there in the red zone on both sides of the ball that frankly I can't explain other than offensively with this. Last season, the 49ers had, offensively, they have four tremendous playmakers, some of the best in the league. George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. Four players last year who were all 1,000 yards or more from scrimmage. Let's take McCaffrey, Ayuk, and Deebo Samuel. Last year, those three combined for 40 touchdowns. 40. McCaffrey had 14 rushing touchdowns, 7 receiving touchdowns, 21 touchdowns total. Deebo Samuel had 7 receiving touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns, 12 touchdowns total. Ayuk had 7 receiving touchdowns. So that's 40 touchdowns among those 3 players. This year, those 3 have combined for 2 touchdowns. Deebo Samuel has 1 rushing touchdown, and Samuel has 1 receiving touchdown. And, McCaffrey obviously missed 8 games with the bilateral Achilles tendonitis. He got in there and for 3 games wasn't all that productive. His most productive game was through one half of that game against Buffalo. Then he sustains the season-ending posterior cruciate ligament injury, out for the year, a season in which he scores 0 times. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk got off to the slow start this season due to the contract hold in, had no training camp, no offseason program with the team, and it showed first several weeks of the season. It looked like he was starting to come on, and then he sustains the torn ACL. He's out for the season. And Deebo Samuel, of course, he's had some injury situations, had pneumonia, all that. Still, just 2 touchdowns for the season. So McCaffrey's out, Deebo Samuel or Ayuk is out, And so now I think for Deebo Samuel, it's important for him to finish strong. It's important for him to show glimpses of previous seasons, to get back on track. I don't think he's going anywhere next year. And I think you can say that about the vast majority of the 49ers nucleus is they're not going anywhere because of contract situations. In the case of some of these guys who are going to be making a lot of money, it would cost more to move on from them than it would be to keep them. And Deebo Samuel fits that bill. He is not scheduled to make much at all in base salary. And in fact, when the 49ers restructured his deal in the offseason, I think it kind of sent the signal that he's going to be here through the end of his contract through 2025. And we all know what happens a lot of times when guys are entering their contract year is they have a strong off season. They show up to camp ready to go. They're ready to go in the regular season, and they're able to carry that momentum over into their contract year in hopes of getting another big time contract. So I think that that's potentially what you're looking at with Deebo Samuel. So when you think about where the team has dropped off, a lot of injuries, but almost all these guys I expect to be back next year. And the question is, can they make a run at it? Can they, if they keep the team together, which I totally expect them to do, are those guys at stages in their careers where they can get back to where they were in their primes? And for Christian McCaffrey, if you saw what he put out there on social media on Wednesday, I mean, this is a guy who's ultra determined, and he isn't obviously. He said it a while back that I think, what did he say, like 95 or 98% of his waking hours is spent thinking about football. And what he did say is, this wasn't my year. And sometimes when it rains, it pours. You can feel sorry for yourself and listen to the birds, or you can hold the line. I'm grateful for the support of everyone in my corner and promise I'll work smarter and harder than ever to come back better from this. So, that in a nutshell, folks, is why I don't think this is necessarily the 2024 season. I don't think it's necessarily the last dance for the 49ers. I think that regardless of how these final 5 weeks play out, I think you're going to see a lot of the same names, a lot of the same faces, the guys who have been the standard bearers for this organization try to run it back in 2025. All right. Well, thanks for watching this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a like and a comment. And that is it for now.